Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to DragonCon Goes Virtual. We are here for day 1, 2, 3, 4, with Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 5. We are here for day 5 of DragonCon Goes Virtual, and it's bizarre. I'm almost as exhausted as I would have been had we actually been at DragonCon. So I don't know how that happened. All I had to do was walk downstairs. But I am so glad that you guys have come to hang out with us for a little bit. We, the four of you guys, we're some of our DragonCon irregulars. I'm our classic track irregulars. So introduce yourselves, and then we'll do something. Kevin.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm Kevin. I'm a podcaster. My show is called The Flopcast. It's part of the ESO network. It's just a silly, goofy, crazy, super nerdy show. And I think we're going to be talking, in part at least today, about some Saturday morning cartoon memories and stuff like that. And that is a subject that we obsess over on The Flopcast. Joe, I can assure you I am at least as exhausted as I would be at DragonCon. So I'm really trying to make this as realistic a DragonCon as possible by being sleep deprived and wiped out and exhausted. So
good call.
You know, that's the way to go. Oh yeah.
I slept, recreate.
I slept like 4 hours. I got up, I ran a half marathon, and now I'm here. Okay. And I'm sleepy. But I got my coffee, and my coffee is from Georgia, the Big Chicken coffee mug.
Nice.
So, you know, I'm up here in Massachusetts, but this is Georgia. This is DragonCon.
Well, the spirit of Massachusetts is the spirit of America. So.
It's the spirit of the chicken.
2 internets away from me roasting in amidst a busted air conditioning system, Mr. Shaun Rosado.
Hey, everybody. My name is Shaun Rosado. I am one half of Pop Cycle Baubles. It is a group, a company that my wife and I put together where we make artwork and we sell it at various conventions. Normally, we're actually in the vendor room, so I would never have an opportunity to be on a panel like this on Monday mornings. But fortunately, since we're doing everything virtual, I have the opportunity to be here, and it's a lot of fun. I'm really glad to be able to just talk about cartoons and stuff. But if you ever want to come and find us, basically go on social media, look up Pop Cycled, and come check out our stuff, and say hey.
Okay, Darin, you keep talking. I'm going to show you guys something that Pop Cycle made that I have in my basement. I'll be right back.
Nice.
But hi, I'm Darin Bush. My job is to get upstaged by other people's art, which is fine. I am no, not at all, Shaun. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. I'm a science fiction and fantasy short story writer. I'm a classic track irregular, and also I just had to see what was going to happen this early on a Monday.
Exactly. Yes, I'm right there with Darin. I basically contacted Joe and Gary last night, and I was like, "Man, I'm so sad that my last panel's over. Do you guys have anything live? Because most of today's shows are all pre-recorded." Yeah. And Gary was like, "Well, we have Michael and Kevin's, kind of like anything goes panel." And I was like, "Anything goes?" Like, yeah. And I was like, "Would they be mad if I want to come in?" They're like, "Nah." I was like, "Okay."
And yeah, this is live, people. This is live. It's early and it's live, but Michael can back me up on this. This is kind of late for us.
Yeah,
our Monday morning panel is not usually this deep into the morning.
Yeah, my name is Michael Bailey. I am a podcast. Just to get that out of the way, I am a podcaster. I run what I laughingly call the Fortress of Baileytude Podcasting Network, which is just an excuse to put all my shows on one site, so that I don't have like 15 sites to keep track of. This is a tradition that goes back to 2014 when Joe was like, "Okay, I'm going to give you a panel to do a presentation, and we're going to have people talk about it. But the catch is, it's got to be 8:30 on Monday." and like everybody who's like new at a job, and you want to be impressive, and you want to show the boss that you're a team player. I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do that." Yeah, so like every year we've done this at like 8:30. This is the first year I have not had to get up at 5 o'clock to either get to DragonCon or to pack up the room and all that. It's also one of the few years where I get to have a dog with me while I do my panels, and they are very happy that we stayed home this weekend, because usually when we come home, This one particularly does not speak to me for like 3 days. But
Oof.
but no, this is for a bunch of years we did superhero presentations because the comic track wasn't, and then the comic track started having me do superhero presentations over there. So I'm like, okay, we'll figure something else out. But it really came down to like Kevin, Joe, and I were like the three people that were like always there. So we wanted to keep this up. But yeah, this is so nice at 10 o'clock. This is
so late.
You know?
So, Michael, I have a question for you real quick.
Yeah.
Did the comics track finally let you do the infamous long gestating steel panel that we have discussed?
No one has ever let me do a steel panel.
I promised you if you showed up for Alienation, I would show up for your steel. So I'm ready for you, I just let me know.
I know. No, you that was a handshake deal, and I appreciate that you keep it. You missed. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I actually read from the Steel novelization on one of the quarantine panels.
No, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
By the way, John Henry Irons in the movie and in that novelization does not understand consent.
Okay, good.
That took a dark turn.
He just picks Sparks up and carries her out of the room, even though she keeps saying no. So
Lord.
Joe, you were there.
We'll post links to that, and we're going to keep doing. We're going to keep doing our Thursday night quarantine panels and all such as this because we're legitimately having too much fun. John Hudgens, good morning.
Hey.
Wow.
Welcome.
John, we've all introduced ourselves already, so introduce yourself.
As the name says, there it is, right? I'm John Hudgens. I'm a filmmaker based out of Knoxville. I'm also known for my work on various licensed properties like Babylon 5 and Star Wars, yes. But these days I do documentaries. I'm working on a new one right now about comedy improv, but it's on hold because the world is on hold. So... yeah, and sorry I missed out on the panel I was supposed to do on Saturday, but I got the opportunity to go hiking to this incredible pair of sandstone arches with my girlfriend, and, I'm sorry, but she wins out over Dragon Con,
Understood.
But, I mean, they were incredible. If y'all never been to them, it's these massive pair of sandstone arches that are like 100 feet tall up in north middle Tennessee.
Cool.
Just gorgeous, fantastic hike, and just it was a good day.
So, Kevin, start running there right now.
Yeah.
And
I'm on my way.
Where are you based, Kevin? I'm sorry.
I'm in Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah, bit of a drive.
So I'll be right there. Wait for me. I'll meet
but
you
look,
there.
he just finished a half marathon, so he's in the zone right now.
Yeah, literally right before this panel.
Well, it's actually a pretty easy hike. I mean, the hike is only about a mile and a half round trip. But I mean, there were some stairs though that were so steep that were practically ladders, not stairs.
So here is the what I was saying earlier. This is a coaster from Popcycled, but yes, coaster on the back. But check out the front. That's the Incredible Hulk.
Right. Yes. Though we actually don't make those anymore. We used to make coasters with real comic books. We would take real comics and we would basically put a chemical treatment on top of it, so that way it would make a nice solid layer. So that way you could use any hot or cold beverages. And the thing that we got completely just worn out with is the fact that bringing that many coasters to a convention with so many different characters just became a nightmare keeping up with logistically as far as keeping stock in our house because we used real comics. So we actually started moving away. We started hand painting them. So now we have like Hulk symbols. I don't know if you've ever seen one of the new ones, Joe, where it's like the big Hulk fist. But Laura does these. She does these amazing jade greens and whatnot. They're beautiful. But yeah, they'll be back next year, and you'll be able to buy some of those, and hope you guys come see it. But thanks for the plug there, Joe. I appreciate you.
So good. I love your stuff.
We had a question come in the comments for John about those arches. My friend Kate from the Strange Animals podcast, I believe she's also in Tennessee, and she's asking, are you sure that wasn't just a big McDonald's?
It's actually called the Twin Arches. It's a state natural area. It's part of the Big South Fork National Park.
But do they serve McNuggets?
No, Not unless you go down to the hostel, the lodge, the mountain lodge, and I don't know, maybe they might in the dinners that they serve there. But
right.
I'm just wondering, can we do? Hang on a second. Let me see if we can do some screen sharing here. Let me. I can pull up.
Well, that's we believe you that it's not really a McDonald's, John. It's okay. We were sort of joking.
Yes, I know, but they are very, very cool.
So Michael and I were talking about Saturday morning cartoons when we were getting ready for what in the world are we going to do for Super Happy Fun Time Hour, and on the Flopcast we were doing some shows earlier this year about the cartoons of 1980-81, that TV season, because it was a weird year for Saturday morning cartoons, and one that I wanted to get Michael's take on as a superhero comic book expert was, and this was a Filmation show that was actually in reruns at this point, but and at this point it was called Batman and the Super Seven from Filmation, and it was kind of an anthology series, bunch of cartoons in there together. The Freedom Force was part of it, which included the Filmation ISIS superhero character.
Yeah,
they made her a cartoon character as part of a team, which was weird and fun. But there were also some other original Filmation superhero cartoons as part of this show that got them in some legal trouble and in a lawsuit with DC Comics. They had Manta and Moray, which were underwater superheroes. It was a man and a woman. The guy, Manta, was sort of a green, scaly creature from the Black Lagoon type looking guy. Then the woman, Moray, was human, but they were just, having underwater adventures. And DC said, hey, that's too much like Aquaman, and took it to court. Also, they did, there was another cartoon called Super Stretch and Micro Woman. And Super Stretch, of course, stretchy guy, and Micro Woman, a woman who shrinks. It was a married African-American couple that were these superheroes, which was pretty cool and very unusual for the time to Filmation's to Filmation's credit. DC said, no, that's too much like Plastic Man and the Atom. So this all went into court, and DC won. And I've watched these cartoons, and they don't seem too much, aren't there all kinds of underwater heroes and plenty of stretchy guys? And what's your take on the DC lawsuit?
Well, I just have to say, Filmation was notoriously cheap. Filmation was notoriously cheap, so they obviously hired bad lawyers.
Yes, that's an excellent point. Yes.
Yeah, don't skimp out on your legal representation, okay? Like, show up.
That is a fantastic point. Michael, what was your take on these characters?
DC has been litigious since the beginning. I mean, they sued Fawcett Publications for like over a decade, it seemed, over Captain Marvel. And basically, Captain Marvel ended after that lawsuit, but that's just because superheroes had kind of run their course. It was just like by the time they won, it's just like, okay, well, it doesn't really matter anyways. But I could see where DC was probably a little more sensitive at that time, because you had the Plastic Man cartoon running. Yes. At that time, and you also had the Super Friends, which were on I don't know if they were on the same network. They were probably on a rival network, because I'm confused as to which. The networks don't mean anything anymore, so I don't really pay attention as close as I used to. But it doesn't surprise me that they would do that, especially around that time, because at that point they were owned by Warner Brothers, so they had the Warner Brothers legal team working for them. And Filmation, a company I will always say built on lies.
Yes.
Because back in the 60s, when they got the DC license to do a series of shorts, they did a Superman series, a Batman series. And then they did like these other ones like Green Lantern, Flash, Teen Titans, and all that.
Right.
And to get that, they were like a two-man operation. So they brought in all of their friends, all of their family members to fill up, like to make look like everyone's working. They had Ted Knight in the recording studio, and if things were going bad, he was supposed to come out and go, I think there's a problem in there. And he did that just in the middle of it randomly. But DC looked around and said, oh, these guys are a good operation. We're going to. So the company that at the end of every episode told you some moral, use some chicanery, which It's just great. The only one of these that I've seen is the Batman one.
Okay.
I was 4 years old, like 3-4 years old in 1980. So my cartoon watching was usually in the afternoon. I think I had a concept that there was Saturday morning, but there was no school, so it really didn't matter.
Oh, yeah.
This Batman show is weird.
This is the one with Batmite.
Yes, because it was a Filmation show. They had to have a little imp that Lou. What is his last name?
Lou Scheimer.
Lou Scheimer did the voice of all of the little goofy characters.
Yep.
But the big shtick of it was that it brought back Adam West and Burt Ward as Batman and Robin. And these they're okay. I think that's the best way to say it. They're not my favorite Batman shows. They're very much in line for the Filmation show that happened in 1968. But the fact that Batmite's there kind of ruins everything, because this is the worst version of Batmite ever.
Yeah, well, Batmite wasn't created for that show. I mean, he was came from the comics.
Yes.
Yeah, he was Batman's imp character, because you were not cool at DC Comics as a superhero in the 50s and 60s if you didn't have an imp character. All the main heroes had an imp
needed
character.
an imp. Yes.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, the big ones are Mixius Pitlick and Batman, and Batmite, rather.
Yeah.
But yeah, that list goes on. Quisp. Aquaman had Quisp.
Oh,
yeah.
Why'd you bring up Quisp? That hurts. That's like that salsa that you had from like 2 days ago that just all of a sudden comes back up in your throat a little bit. You're like, oh no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
there was another character called Quisp that wasn't related to the cereal, or was
not the cereal.
And the Flash had one that was part of a story that they specifically later said never happened.
yes.
Because it was this character that was just like, well, no, this is really what your origin was like. And later writers were like, no, not at all.
No.
Yeah. And I think they even said that particular Mike character was, I don't think they ever said it was actually Mr. Mxyzptlk, but I think they said he was like one of those ninth dimensional creatures that was just screwing with Flash for like a day. And he got bored because, Flash is too pure. So he's like, okay, I'm out of here, which I always thought was funny. But Mr. Mxyzptlk is all about Superman. I'm like, Superman's the Boy Scout, but yet Flash, he's boring. Okay, fine, whatever.
Well, to be fair, Silver Age Flash was pretty much was white bread in every sense of the word.
He really was. I'm not gonna defend Barry Allen in the 60s. It was not a good scene. It was very boring by comparison. So yeah, I mean, how Superman in the 60s became rainbow colored at one point. I mean, come on, how can you not love that, right?
I know in the comic books, or in the Comics Buyer's Guide newspaper, for years they would have an annual Mopey Awards, which they would award to just the most ridiculous things that happened in Silver Age comic books. That was named after the Flash's little imp character, Mopey. There he is.
Oh my God.
That's Mopey.
I don't know what I'm more mad about, the fact that you actually brought Mopey up, who I was intentionally not trying to name, or the fact that you brought up Quisp. I'm very torn right now. I'm very torn. Oh man, yeah.
I'm reminded. Sharon in the comments mentioned the Batman Lone Ranger Hour, and which was also Filmation stuff. And when they name it stuff like that, like Batman and the Super 7, it made me think Batman's going to team up with these people.
Yeah,
but he did not.
No,
and even worse, later editions of that show it was called the Batman Tarzan Hour or the Batman Lone Ranger Hour, which would have been even cooler.
Yep.
But
and Zorro,
no team ups.
Zorro got in the mix at some point as well.
Zorro would have been a natural conclusion, considering the fact that, of course, Bruce Wayne was inspired by Zorro in a lot of the different origins. But I think out of all those variants, I would have liked to have seen Tarzan happen, because they could have both been swinging. And I would have loved the mashup of just them swinging together. That would have just made me so happy.
Although even without Batman teaming up with him, the Filmation's Tarzan cartoon was really good.
I remember,
and they were adapting the Edgar Rice Burroughs stories. They took it seriously, and then the animation, even for Filmation, the animation was really nice. It was rotoscoping, so that nice, smooth, realistic characters. So the Tarzan one that they did was quite good.
Yeah, we can mock Filmation all day long, and we could, but you also have to. I can't be too hard on them, because they put out. not only did they put out a lot of shows, they put out a lot of different types of shows. I mean, they got a little more formulaic once they hit upon like He-Man and all that.
Yeah.
But in the 70s, they threw a lot of weird like concepts out there. Like you weren't gonna have like a Lone Ranger or a Tarzan show on, from like Hanna-Barbera. They just weren't going to do that. They had Hanna-Barbera had their lane and they stayed in it. So you had Filmation, which was more of kind of like the outsider. And because it was such a small operation, I think they had the freedom to kind of move around a little more because go ahead.
Also, in the 70s, though, the Lone Ranger and Tarzan were much more popular than they are today because, all the original shorts and films ran constantly on local syndication. I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
If y'all were alive then, I'm afraid not many. But, I mean, I remember, growing up in the 70s, the early 70s, I mean, that's what we watched. I mean, on Saturdays, if it wasn't cartoons, it was Three Stooges, Laurel and Hardy, and Lone Ranger. I mean,
yeah, and I watched all the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movies on Saturday.
When Filmation did that Lone Ranger cartoon in the late 70s, early 80s, they tried to get the guys from the TV series. Like they wanted to cast Clayton Moore and Jay Silverheels to be Lone Ranger and Tonto, and Clayton Moore was difficult about it. He wanted to. It wasn't a money thing. He wanted to put more work into it than they had the time and resources to do. Like Clayton Moore apparently, and this is the way Lou Scheimer tells it in his book, like he wanted big cast rehearsals and meetings and multiple rehearsing of and they were like, no, you come in and read your lines and that's it. That's all we're going to do. And Clayton was like, that's not enough. No, if we're going to do that. And he walked. And
let's
then
go.
Jay Silverheels said, well, if Clayton's not doing it, I'm not doing it. And so he walked as well.
He didn't really want to do it. He was just
probably just didn't want to do it.
He was just looking for an excuse out. Well, if you're not going to take it seriously.
No, I think part of the problem, though, was Clayton Moore had a real problem determining where Clayton Moore ended and where the Lone Ranger started because like, the rights owners actually had to sue him to stop him from appearing with the mask, appearing as the Lone Ranger. He had to start appearing as Clayton Moore, not as the Lone Ranger.
Yeah, I think eventually, like he'd wear like big sunglasses instead of the mask. Eventually, that's how he got around.
And that really came to bite them in the ass when the Legend of the Lone Ranger was coming out because all the press was, look at this big company suing this little guy who's just trying to do it. Now, to be fair, I'm not a fan of that movie. I loved it as a kid. It did not age well. Even though Christopher Lloyd's the bad guy in it, which is there's a big fist fight with Christopher Lloyd. Those words have never been said before. I remember also the other guy, not Clayton Moore. Who's the second Lone Ranger? There was two of them. He ended up on an episode of The Greatest American Hero.
Oh, yeah.
My heroes have always been cowboys. Where Ralph does one of those things where he just takes his class places because apparently you can do that.
Yeah, his class of
about those kids.
his class of 27-year-old high school students.
Right.
Yes.
It's like, we want to do a superhero show, but can it also be Welcome Back, Kotter?
Yeah. Where the teacher mysteriously disappears every few minutes to go off and do superhero things. It's fine. It's totally
Don't get me wrong. I love The Greatest American Hero. This is this book that I've shown a couple of times. This is it's called Lou Scheimer, Creating the Filmation Generation, and it's a big book, and it just goes year by year through everything the company, and you can just see the characters on the cover around Lou, and that shows you just the amazing diversity.
Well, except for whoever's between He-Man and She-Ra, they're apparently green and they're poking right through.
Somebody is we're seeing Mopey. There he is. Mopey can peek right through the book.
He's peeking out.
Oh, you know who it is? That is he's the same green as my green screen. That is Frankenstein.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
From the Groovy Ghoulies, I assume.
Nice.
I thought it was Dracula that couldn't appear in a reflection.
Come on.
Before we move on from the Lone Ranger, you guys have heard the famous Jay Thomas story that I always told on Letterman every year.
Yes,
gold,
yes.
solid gold. Yeah.
Every Christmas, Jay Thomas would tell his Clayton Moore story.
God, I looked forward to that every year. That
me too.
And I just blanked their name.
Darlene Love.
Yeah, the Darlene Love thing, the meatball on the Christmas tree.
Yes. They would they'd throw a football at a meatball on top of the Christmas tree on the Letterman show every year.
I would wait up and wrap presents that night watching that show.
And on the Gilbert Gottfried's podcast, Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast, he had Jay Thomas on as a guest a few years ago, and they brought up that Lone Ranger story that he would tell in Letterman. And Jay said, I got to tell you what happened after that. And he had a whole second, like what happened with Clayton Moore later that day and that night. He had this insane story, which is not suitable for a Monday morning panel like this one, but it was crazy.
Online.
Yeah, I'll post links to that in the notes. But we've continuing the Saturday morning in 1980-ish theme. What could we please? And speaking of imps, could we? I really want to talk about Fonz and the Happy Days gang.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Has that sentence ever been uttered?
No one has ever wanted to talk about it before this panel, but man, we do.
We do.
No, we don't. I remember being like 3-4 years old when that came out, and like it's just like barely sourced. Yeah. And I remember watching it even as a kid, going, "That's not the Fonz."
Yeah.
Like it did
Why
not
resonate. Doing this?
Yeah, it did not resonate. It felt like somebody was playing like a giant prank on me. Like that's not the Fonz. And there's just something about having those actors. Sometimes when you go to cartoons, you can get away with it. Like Star Trek did a pretty serviceable job of doing Star Trek the animated series. And you can even look at stuff like the Super Friends and Spider-Man, which I think started like in '81. But when you did the Fonz, it just did not work. I mean, honestly, I think the Fonz would have been better suited as like a special guest appearance in like a Scooby-Doo episode.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah, I think that would have been a much more serviceable way of doing it. But because they were not really embracing everything that Happy Days was, it just felt like a very poorly thought out cash grab that did not work.
Oh yeah, it's silly. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
The 70s were full of bullshit cash grabs. I mean, Gilligan's Planet. There was a Laverne and Shirley cartoon. For God's sake.
Yes.
They were in the army, and their drill sergeant was a pig.
In fact, I just learned something, Shaun. I can give you more reason to hate Fonz and the Happy Days gang, and its sister series, Laverne and Shirley, and I suppose the Mork and Mindy cartoon also, because I learned this just recently, but evidently. Because Gary Marshall, the creator of Happy Days and all those other shows, because he was so powerful at ABC, he was the one pushing after. I think probably after the Fonz cartoon was successful, and then that led to the other ones. And he said, "No, let's make more cartoons based on my shows." And so they did, and they had to bump some other shows to make room for Gary Marshall's TV shows to turn into cartoons. And according to Mark Evanier, a post he put up recently this year. That's one of the reasons that Thundar was canceled.
No!
It was to make room for these goofy Gary Marshall cartoons.
Oh, come on. You don't cancel Thundar for freaking Fonz.
I knew I could make Shaun even angrier.
Oh, my God. No, that's not right. That's not right, Kevin. I'm actually a little bit like, I love Gary Marshall. He's the man with the golden touch when it comes to like sitcoms. But like, I know he's dead, but he's kind of dead to me right now for like the next day or two. Like, I'm just like, no. Like, no. He got fun. You know what? I need somebody else to talk. I'm a little mad.
Was he getting a cut of all of these?
I mean,
oh yeah.
Is that why he was pushing?
Oh, absolutely. He was making money off these cartoons. Those were based on his shows. So sure.
Definitely.
And they were to make.
Yep.
Yeah, they were not great. But Thundar the Barbarian, they could still do Thundar the Barbarian stuff today.
They could, absolutely. Thundar the Barbarian was one of those shows. I remember how terrified I was every single time that cartoon started. The meteorite passes by Earth, shattering the moon, and then like everything just goes to hell. You see like all civilization you basically fall under the waves and lava and just terribleness. You're like, what the hell? And they're saying, oh, this is like 40 years in the future, like, you're just freaking out, like that's what's going to happen in my lifetime, and then ages pass and a man with a lightning sword is going to show up, and Ukla the Mock,
but we have to wait like ages.
Yes, but oh my god, but that was such a great show. And I got to be honest, when I was a kid and through the 80s, as they started talking about global warming and global climate change, the thing that my brain always globbed onto was the beginning of Thundar the Barbarian. I thought that was a one-to-one comparison. If we don't fix the Earth, meteor's going to come by, everything's going to go terrible. So yeah, I mean, it does kind of feel like they were right to a degree, because my brain still puts those two things together. But absolutely, they could bring Thundar back, like live action, animated. Just give me Thundar.
What year was Thundar set in? 1990 something?
Yeah, I think it was 1999. I think when the apocalypse happened, right? I think
1994.
Was it 94? Okay, yeah,
1984. Yeah.
No. According to the Wikipedia article, the passage of the Runaway Planet happened in 1994, but the series is set in 3994.
Yeah, it's like 1,000, 2,000 years ahead. Yeah.
Like the atmosphere of the Earth was sucked away when this all happened. So,
remember all the clouds went.
So what we're saying is that within our lifetime, that was going to happen, like in 13 years or so. But it's going to take 1,500 years for things to get okay once Thundar shows up.
Yeah, it was the Filmation version of The Day After.
Yeah,
it was just horrific. It was horrific.
Oh Lord! But
Thundar. Steve Guttenberg, which I think was the problem with Thundar, was that there was no Steve Guttenberg at all in it.
The Thundar setting is still better than 2020. I kind of feel that.
Guys, I don't say that because we've got years ahead of us, and it seems like lately.
Months ahead of us.
It seems like lately, like whenever somebody like one person will say, well, next year will be better, and life is like, no. So let's all back off and just
Well, I mean, honestly, I think if you're looking at Thundar the Barbarian and you're looking at what's happening right now in the world, I think the one thing we could take away from it is the more we ignore the problems that are right in front of us, the worse things are going to get. So I mean, Thundar was always very proactive. He was like, let's go fix the problem. So I feel like if people stop trying to put their heads in the sands and saying, hey, let's just really put all of our effort into fixing the problems that we have made, we're going to be fine. But that's more of I believe in human ingenuity thing, and I blame cartoons for giving me that optimism. So I mean, even in an apocalyptic setting, I knew that Ariel and Ukla the Mock and Thundar were going to fix the planet, and that planet was effed. And I still believed in them. And to be fair, for like, what was it, 4 seasons, 3 seasons they ran?
2 seasons.
Was it only 2?
Yeah,
damn.
Only 2.
I thought it ran longer than this. See, now I'm even more mad at Gary Marshall.
It was canceled after 2 seasons. Then it went to another network. NBC picked it up, but they just aired reruns.
Right. Maybe that's why I'm still remembering it as going as long as it did. But I mean, even then, they still had a lot of positive kind of outcomes. So for me, I'm always kind of a bit of an optimist, and I definitely blame cartoons for being the foundation in which all that optimism was built up on. So
yeah.
But going back to the like the Happy Days cartoons and stuff like that, it's just, I remember being a kid. I have some. I'm not one of these people that became an adult and just completely forgot how to, like, what my mind was like as a kid. Mm-hmm. And I don't ever remember thinking, I really want a cartoon version of something else. Like, later in the 80s, there were like Saturday morning cartoons of Teen Wolf and the Karate Kid. And I loved those movies, but I was okay with those movies as movies. So I'm just wondering, were there kids in like 1980 that were all excited that Fonz and the Happy Days gang were traveling through time with a weird girl and a cupcake and a dog named
Mr. Cool.
Who wanted to be Fonzie. I just have to imagine the Coke-filled pitch meeting that this took place in. No, we're going to do all this. And I understand that these networks and the people who produce these cartoons had set parameters of what they thought worked. And they wanted to work within those parameters. But like I can't imagine legions of children at the time going, no, we want to see Fonz of the Happy Days gang pull a time tunnel because this will be awesome.
Right. Like what kind of weird polling data did they pull together, right? Like they just get a bunch of kids in the room and they're like, okay, if you could have a Fonz cartoon, what would you want to see in it? And they're like, okay, we need Snoopy as Mr. Cool, right? Because clearly, isn't that Snoopy's alternate ego, Mr. Cool? Wasn't that his?
Joe Cool.
Joe Cool, yeah. So we need Snoopy as Joe Cool. We need a time traveling, device. We need some kids around him, and we need like some kind of freaky, chick, like it just. What? Like I cannot.
That's all part of the Scooby Gang. A
little bit, yeah.
Well, yeah, because after Scooby, every goddamn show seemed to have some kind of theme with a critter, and they're off having adventures. And but part of the problem is just the lead time on these shows because it's like they would show up a couple of years or a year or two after something was super popular.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
it
we're
took
gonna get right on that. And it'll be done in 2 years.
Yeah, but
the real Ghostbusters, of course, is one of the cases where it really worked. But I mean, it took them 2 years, from the film to get the show ready. Because I remember, I was actually at the original presentation for that at the WorldCon in '86, and
cool.
people were just like, "Holy shit! This this looks good." Because obviously people sort of remembered the live action Ghostbusters that Filmation did in the '70s, and of course there was no connection other than Columbia licensing the name, and then there was a whole fight over the name when the animated series series came out. You had the real Ghostbusters and the original Ghostbusters, because neither one of them could use just Ghostbusters anymore.
Yeah, that was such a weird time. But it is funny that, of course, Funimation became so litigious about Ghostbusters, considering the fact that they did every single crooked thing they could to get anything under the radar. And of course, Dan Aykroyd clearly coming up with Ghostbusters after the original. I always thought it was funny how, just vehemently they held on to that property. They would just not give up the name Ghostbusters, even though
they just give up the name. And they, Columbia,
but only for the movie though. But they wouldn't just wouldn't give them the name outright. There were like all these caveats attached to it.
Well, because they were at that point they were looking like, hey, we own the name, we can capitalize on it.
Right?
Yeah.
No, definitely. But
2 years later, yeah.
Yeah, but Michael, you actually brought up something I thought was funny, which is what kids were looking at properties that were aimed more or less at adults and said, "I want a cartoon of that." And one perfect example actually showed up in my brain as soon as you asked that question, which is RoboCop.
Mm-hmm.
RoboCop was a movie very clearly for adults, but I remember being, what was it? That came out in 1988, I think. It was 88.
Film.
Yeah. The original movie came out in 88, I think, right?
No,
87, 88. So I was about 9-10 years old. And I remember visiting my grandmother in New York, and we're walking through Manhattan, and there is a giant, complete side of a building poster of freaking RoboCop stepping out of that car, just looking all amazing and metal. And I said, I need to see this movie. And my parents were like, you might be too young for that movie. And I was like, I need it. And to my parents' credit, that was the very first rated R movie they ever let me watch. But they had to be in the room, and they said, if this messes you up, that's it. And when they came out with that cartoon a couple years later, I was all about that cartoon. And I'm sorry, my wife's trying to distract me in the best possible way. And I thought that was such an amazing thing. And it is one of those few franchises where I think very clearly they wanted to make an adult-oriented movie as far as with the violence and the satirization. But the design was so leveled at kids. It was really just a perfect mesh of, this is an adult story, but we know we're going to get the kids who are going to want to buy the toys, who are going to want to have the sleeping bag, and who will probably want a cartoon.
Yeah, well, as Freak has always said, it was toyetic,
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, it was. Definitely.
I just looked it up on Wikipedia. I thought it was much later. Apparently, it was the next year. I mean,
it was pretty quick turnaround. Yeah.
That was part of the Marvel for 5 seconds was trying to have a new Saturday morning presence in syndication, and they would show that. They would show Pride of the X-Men and those types of shorts.
I didn't know that they ever showed that on.
Every once in a blue moon, they would. Yes.
Wow.
And Marvel then published comics based on, they put out a Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends special. There was a RoboCop series before Now Comics got it. So yeah, it's one of those things where but I think that's the exception that proves the rule when you really think about it, because maybe Gilligan's Planet.
Yeah.
Maybe Gilligan's Planet is a concept that I could buy because Gilligan's Island was a giant cartoon just to begin with. So
Sure.
it's not like, you know, well, well, to be fair, Happy Days wasn't like a hard-boiled look at the youth of the 19th.
No, especially as it went on, right? I mean, it became more and more fantastic.
Well, and of course, Happy Days was just a TV's attempt to rip off American Graffiti. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
They that's man. I can talk about Happy Days and its spin-offs and creation and everything, but that's another panel which we should do at some point.
We can totally do that. Yeah,
I feel like these shows like Fonzie and the Happy Days Gang and I like that, like, we don't need a Happy Days cartoon to, well, I could just end the sentence right there, but we don't. If we're gonna get a Happy Days cartoon, we don't need one that's just like the live action hanging around at Al's, at Arnold's, because we have that on prime time live action. And so if you're going to do a cartoon, and you can do whatever you want in a cartoon, so put him in a flying saucer and let's travel through time. I like that.
And there was a Mork and Mindy cartoon, Sharon, who in our comments. It was in the same batch as the Gary Marshall stuff we just talked about. It was Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, and Mork and Mindy. And the Mork and Mindy cartoon was Mork and Mindy already was what the cartoon was.
Right.
I think the only thing they did was they gave him a little eggmobile to drive around in. Yeah,
that's a good point. That the live action Mork and Mindy obviously was science fiction, comedy, goofy, supernatural stuff already. Punky Brewster is another example of they made a cartoon and they added fantasy elements and characters to it. I feel like
the before the toy cartoons got to be a big thing, a bigger thing, like the He-Mans and the G.I. Joes. The deal was, I feel like maybe the creative process was we just have to use what is already working in live action and just put those people in cartoon form. Because there was a Muhammad Ali cartoon. Mm-hmm. He punched no one. Ridiculous.
Well, it's funny. Somebody earlier was talking about the fact that there was a Mr. T cartoon where he was a gymnastics coach. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I mean, dude, at one point, remember Mr. T, you had the A-Team, he was in Rocky. He was Rocky 3?
3.
Yeah. 3. He was Rocky 3. He had his own cereal. I mean, he had his own cartoon. I mean, I had a lunchbox with Mr. T on it. I mean, Mr. T was everywhere. That was a man who was toyetic. You want to talk about toyetic? That dude, like, no doubt.
I will follow and watch anything Mr. T does, even today.
Yes.
A few years ago, he did a motivational series where he would go to people who were having problems. They would ask Mr. T for help. And
he would come running into the scene like in a track suit. Mr. T, they'd show the people having a problem, and then just in the distance, here comes Mr. T. He would run into the
fool.
Yeah, like my restaurant is failing, and Mr. T would run in and go, "Fool! I'll fix this whole restaurant."
The Mr. T cartoon terrified me as a child. One particular episode terrified me because the 80s were the decade where law enforcement finally woke up to the fact that, hey, maybe these kids that are disappearing aren't running away. Maybe they're being kidnapped, and we need to look into that. Right. Unfortunately, because of the death of Adam Walsh. And so Stranger Danger was a huge thing. And there was an episode where the kids get kidnapped and they're trying to tell an adult, like they always tell you, tell an adult, but the kidnappers come up and go, "Oh no, this is my kid. He's just all excited and he just does this at places." And the adults were like, "Oh, okay, go on." I'm like, "Wait, that could happen? What the hell?" So
I haven't. My favorite insane episode of the Mr. T cartoon, because I have one as well, Michael. There was an episode where Mr. T and the whole gymnastics team get trapped in a cave, and they're starving inside the cave. They find a giant snake who lives in the cave. They capture and kill and cook and slice up and eat.
I don't remember this at all.
This is on camera. You watch all this happen. You see Mr. T and a team of gymnastic students eating slices of snake, which they cooked inside a cave.
And that's your segue into the Mr. T cooking show right there. Somebody in the comments was like, "We need a Mr. T cooking show."
Yeah,
the first episode has to be a replay of that cartoon, and then he goes,
Yeah.
"Now I'm going to show you how to do it in real life."
Yes, every week he just cooks a snake. We're like, Mr. T, we love that you have a cooking show now, but can you mix it up a little bit? You're creeping us out by cooking a snake every week.
Oh my Lord!
I gotta say right now, I really want to see a Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart cartoon show just like these.
Yes,
Where they
starring
go on
Willie
adventures.
Nelson.
That would be great.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just doing a little bit of Googling because I was remembering the RoboCop series being so much later. Apparently, I must have been remembering RoboCop Alpha Commando, which came out in 1998 because I remember running that on our TV station when we signed on the air. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but yeah, I was apparently confusing. I didn't really realize there was the '88 one. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, RoboCop, considering the fact that RoboCop is such a weird, I mean, not to go into movies, but Paul Verhoeven having that weird kind of fever dream of let's really satirize America in the 80s and kind of heighten everything up to 11 to really showcase the ills of mid 80s, just rampant. Yeah, mid-rampant capitalism and violence and whatnot. And then, of course, kind of the dehumanization of the regular man and kind of turning them into product. I think it resonates a lot more now than it did back then. But I also think that, the idea, the visualization of this chrome man, just it resonated with people in the 80s, especially with kids. I remember having that freaking cap gun toy. Remember, he had the cap gun in his back, and you could put the little caps in it, and it had a little trigger, and he would actually fire off little smoke pellets. It made it sound like a little gun. Very, very memorable, and it's just something that for whatever reason, it was capturing not only the adult imagination, but it was very clearly something kids were going to respond to as well.
I missed out on those toys because I was already in college by the time RoboCop came out. So,
but
yeah, well, I was like I said, 10, 11 when it came out. So I was aging out of it to a degree, but I still watched cartoons well into my 20s. As far as like waking up on Saturday morning cartoons, like I must record.
Oh yeah,
and this was the era. This was like the goal, like the middle era of the Saturday morning. 1980 was like the middle era of the Saturday morning cartoons being important.
Mm-hmm.
By 1990, NBC started cracking the code on doing like live action stuff with Saved by the Bell and California Dreams,
right?
And that basketball show that I never watched. But 1980 was like, this was still, it was before like a lot of it was before Reagan deregulated everything, and you could have cartoons based on toys.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of tell that they're still trying to hold on to the old concepts. I mean, you had like a Richie Rich cartoon, which I like. Shaun mentioned it earlier. It's just like I remember that he said, "I remember that show lasting longer." I had no concept of seasons as a kid,
right?
And so it always surprises me when these shows, like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, is a good example. To me, that show ran for 15 years and it had 20 seasons.
Yeah, like it started in 1980 and it ended like in the mid 90s.
Yeah, and
of course, also a lot of the shows back then, they only produced like 13 episodes a season. They would only run on Saturdays. It wasn't until you had like syndication where they would do 65 at a batch, and then that was it. They ran the hell out of those.
Yeah, it was like you got the 13 weeks, and then on the back half of the season, they ran the 13 episodes again, and then during the summer, they ran it again.
Right. Yeah, so, with 13, you can run them all 4 times. That takes you through the whole year.
Of course, when we were kids back then, I mean, we did sort of have an indication of seasons because fall was always the beginning of school, it was the beginning of the new TV.
Right.
See the big ads, the NBC primetime special about what's new on Saturday mornings this fall.
Yeah, they did. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that was a big thing for us, as kids.
But I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
If you were reading comics, there were constantly like 2-page ads and whole solid page ads, like showcasing all of the shows that are coming up.
Starting this fall on NBC. Yeah.
So, and like in 80, you had a Heathcliff cartoon that I have no memory of. I remember the syndicated Heathcliff one, but when you were describing this on your show, Kevin, I was just like, I literally never knew that existed until you were talking about it.
Absolutely. I was excited about when the Heathcliff cartoon started in the early 80s because I was a big fan of the Heathcliff comic strip. And yeah, the cartoon didn't really work for me just because it was so different from the strip because Heathcliff talked in the cartoon.
Yeah.
And in the comic strip, he doesn't even like have thought bubbles like Garfield does. Like that, you don't get that at all from Heathcliff in the comics.
Heathcliff is Garfield homeless.
So it was very
different. But he's also kind of like the king of the city, though. I mean, like everybody knows Heathcliff. Everybody owes him a favor. You know, I mean, he's got his cat crew with him. I mean, seriously, like he's the godfather of that city. I mean, he really just walks around. He owns that joint. You know, I mean, because honestly, I was never a big fan of Heathcliff, the comic strip, but I remember fondly watching the Heathcliff cartoon. Yeah, so I was kind of backwards on that one. Yeah.
The two of them weren't that far separated. I mean, there was 1980 and then 1984.
Yeah, there was some couple different versions. The original Heathcliff cartoon in 1980, it was Heathcliff, and then they also did segments called Dingbat, which was a vampire dog.
Yeah, Heathcliff and Dingbat.
Yeah.
Well, hell, I mean, they got Mel Blanc, June Foray, Don Messick. I mean, they had Paul.
Yeah, killer voice. Oh yeah, the voice talent was outstanding. Yeah. Mel Blanc was the voice of Heathcliff.
So what else?
He was in both of them actually.
I've got something super obscure here, actually. Let me pull this up on my screen here. This is something that I have.
Got something super obscure is what basically we would say at every one of our classic track panels.
Yeah, right. So you can't see a lot of this on the screen here, but this was from 1980. There was a version of the Flintstones that they did this year. It's called the Flintstones Comedy Hour. It was a 90-minute version of the Flintstones with several different segments.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's called the Flintstones Comedy Show.
Oh yeah, I was about to say. It's 90 minutes. So only 60 minutes of this is going to be funny.
Yes.
Right.
Flintstones Comedy Show. It was 90 minutes and several different segments, including some weird ones. They did one called Bedrock Cops, which was Fred and Barney were police officers, and they were working with the Shmoo.
Why was the Shmoo there?
The Shmoo was there in Bedrock working with the police.
So what that implies, though, is that the Shmoo, who had his own cartoon, even though Little Abner was, 50 years earlier?
Yeah, yes.
Right.
Yes, that's from the 50s. Yeah, somehow Hanna-Barbera got their hands on the Shmoo in the 70s.
They're like, what we need for the kids here in the 80s is a character from 50 years ago.
And they just kept trying. They put the Shmoo in several different formats, trying to get it to go. So there was also Dino and Cave Mouse, which was Dino from the Flintstones chasing a cave mouse around. It was like Tom and Jerry.
Tom and Jerry, yeah.
And the image behind me now is that a monster family called the Frankenstones, and which was weird because the Flintstones already had a monster family. Remember, they did the Gruesomes.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Next door to the Flintstones back in the original series. This was the Frankenstones. That big Frankenstein dude behind me, the father, was voiced by Charles Nelson Riley.
Oh, yes.
And what's even crazier, if I slide over this way, the son, that kid's name is Freaky, voiced, and this is 1980, remember, voiced by Paul Rubens.
What?
That must have been like
this is one of his first.
Yeah.
When he was just still doing Pee-wee as a comedy act on stage. Yeah.
1980.
That guy.
And
I am never not in love with when they put monsters in comedic situations, or like
absolutely
have a bunch of different types of monsters. In a
so Groovy Ghoulies and Drac Pack and Fang Face and Monster Squad. I know Joe is doing a podcast right now about Monster Squad. Love all that stuff.
Because of course I am.
Yes. Why wouldn't you?
Absolutely. I mean, not to go off onto a Monster Squad tangent, but I mean, Monster Squad is one of those movies that I keep telling people it's one of those perfect films that if you've never seen it, go watch it. You will fall in love with it. I show a friend of mine. There are a couple of movies from the 80s where I'm like, if you've never seen these films, you owe it to yourself to. One is obviously Back to the Future. If you've never seen it, you got to go watch it. Another one is The Last Starfighter. Perfect, amazing, awesome film. Yep. Third one that's always on that list is Monster Squad. Monster Squad is so fun.
Shaun, but agreed. But we're not even talking about Monster Squad, the movie. There was a Saturday morning live action Monster Squad.
Oh, you're right. There was.
TV
I'm sorry. I went to the movie because I love that movie so hard.
Me too. That's the one that people know. People know the movie.
Definitely.
Nobody remembers the show, but Joe.
And it was during the 80s, so it's okay. I slid it in. Whoop! Oh, I killed the port.
The TV series is
they're tasty when they're crunchy.
They are. On the first episode of the podcast that we're doing for Monster Squad with John S. Drew, who does the Batcave podcast. Well, it's a series on the Batcave podcast about the Batman 66 show, but John had not seen the Monster Squad cartoon from the 80s, and I derailed the whole podcast and said, no, stop. Why are we doing this when you have never even seen the 87? And it's a different thing, but oh my gosh, how have you not seen?
Yeah.
The 1970s series, this was a Saturday morning show, live action, and the concept was there was a night watchman at a wax museum with monsters in it, and they would come to life at night, and he would kind of lead them as Frankenstein and Wolfman and Dracula would go out and fight crime. That night watchman was Fred Grandy, Gopher from the Love Boat.
So thank you for the cheap plug. I will put a link to that thing that I'm doing.
It's good. I am also doing a series of podcasts with John over on the Batcave podcast about another live action 70s Saturday morning show. John and I are going through each episode of Electro Woman and Dyna Girl.
Oh my Lord!
And you're spacing those out because there's not a lot of them.
We're going to do
Michael. The best thing about doing this, it's not going to take us very long.
We're doing all 8 episodes.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring up something before we might have to start wrapping up. I don't know what our time schedule is, but Michael earlier. I'm sorry.
We're not going to wrap up. I don't care.
Okay, no problem. I didn't know. But I wanted to bring up something because Michael said something I thought was really kind of important and cool, which was that he was talking about there was a moment in the 80s where cartoons really had this sense of importance, where they started doing like, make sure that your kids, no stranger danger, things like that. And I always thought it culminated in that one episode or that one cartoon where they got everybody together. I think this is like 1989. Yeah, the All-Stars to the rescue, and they got everybody in that freaking thing. I mean, like, so many obscure characters all showed up, all basically to be, kind of help kids steer away from, problematic situations. Specifically, I think that one was all drug use, I believe, for the most part, drug use and strangers. And I just remember like how heavy it was, and I always told people it's like an after-school special. And if you ever mentioned people who to folks who did not grow up in the 80s what an after-school special was, they just look at you like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm telling you, this was a thing. Like, in the 80s, cartoons were definitely a vehicle to kind of help, for lack of a better term, parent the children, because they thought that it was such a problem in America that, these entertainers had to kind of have like a special message for the kids in order to help them grow into responsible adults. And I always thought that was a very kind of heavy, but also lofty goal for a cartoon to do. And I just wanted to bring that up because I always thought that was a cool thing.
The after school special started in the 70s. I mean, that was like, what, 72 looks like, so.
Am I seeing this correctly that the cartoon Beatles were in the All-Stars?
I believe
so. In the cost, I think they. Right.
I remember that morning because I watched that because it was a little girl trying to get her brother to stop doing drugs.
Right. Yeah.
Turtles and all that. But,
I was going to say, having the cartoon Beatles be an anti-drug spokes.
Well, it's okay when you're an adult and you're experimenting, but when you're like 7, Kool-Aid and chicken tendies and stuff.
Wait till you're older, kids.
Don't be like me and John.
Yeah.
Even though, I mean, let's be fair. If you're really being completely honest about this entire situation, right? You're talking about trying to stop a kid from doing drugs, except the entire cartoon is basically one giant acid trip. Every single character they see. I mean, you got Scooby, you got the Beatles, you got Ninja Turtles, you got talking cars, you got everybody.
I think Winnie the Pooh was in it too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're tripping balls. I mean,
according to the Wikipedia article, the Beatles are not in it.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
But they also, I think the main problem with that is that it did not have Turbo Teen. Because I mean, a guy turning into a car. I mean, what kid relate to wanting to do that?
Yeah, but at the same time, whenever he turned into a car and his smile became that grill, that was nightmare fuel every time. I'm like, no, I had to, even as an adult, I look away just for that split second where his face, like, no.
Turbo Teen was so bizarre, and I love that it happened, and I love that it just came up, because how could we do a panel like this and not mention Turbo Teen?
It was down to, if Kevin wasn't going to mention it, I had to get Kevin to smile. If you ever want to make Kevin happy,
just mention Turbo Teen.
Yep.
Well, I also enjoy the Turbo Teen. I did an audio sketch a few years ago and I posted it on Christmas morning. It was a very Turbo Teen Christmas, and it's one of my prize performances. So it's so.
And
good.
of course, Joe, you're waiting for the Turbo Teen and Automan mashup, right?
Surely somebody at some point.
I know Automan's not a cartoon, but do you guys remember Automan?
Of course.
Yeah.
Trying to rip off Tron,
Guys, if you've never seen Automan, you don't even have to watch the whole series. Just watch the introduction on YouTube and then find Automan and an ATM. Like the ATMs were brand new technology when this show came out. And at one point, Automan needs money and he just walks up to an ATM or drives up to an ATM and he's like, "Hey, give me some money." And the ATM's like, "Hi, Automan, take my cash." It just spits money out. It's so
I saw Automan in a production of Jekyll and Hyde back in 1999. So I got to see Automan.
Jr.
Really?
No, the guy that played Automan. Desi Arnaz.
Okay.
Yeah, Desi Arnaz was like the partner of Automan.
Straight man, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
God, you got him in mid-transformation, Kevin.
Right, but at least it's not that damn smile. I'm cool. The hands turning into tires were probably the coolest thing though, where he just kind of reached out and they just. Turbo Teen was a cool idea. Just that damn grill smile thing.
Sean,
I'm Turbo
totally
Teen for anyone who doesn't know. Turbo Teen people.
Sean, I'm totally on your side for this. That face transformation is nightmare fuel.
Ooh.
Terrible.
But speaking of transformations, way up in the comments, I did want to mention this also ties back to the Flintstones comedy show. Fred and Barney Meet the Thing.
Yes.
Yeah, they really tried to make fetch happen with Ben Grimm.
Yeah, because he had a solo cartoon for like a season, didn't he?
Benji Grimm. Ring, do your thing.
Yes.
Where he would bring it together and turn into the thing. So they really tried to. I guess
they did the whole FF show one season with Herbie, and then the next season he was on Fred and Barney Meet the Thing, and he didn't actually meet Fred and Barney. They did little like hee-haw comedy sketches in between the episodes, and I'm
sorry. I'm just imagining Fred and Barney dressed up in hee-haw clothes. Just
I distinctly remember them going like Fred and Barney walking up to, "Hey, thing," and then going, "Hey, do you remember when you were born?" And the thing goes, "No, I sure don't. I was too young," and that was it.
Hanna-Barbera did a lot of these combo shows where they would just throw a couple of properties together and just sell the show with both names in the title, and they would not meet, and they had nothing to do with each other. But that's just that Hanna-Barbera found that was an easier way to sell these shows, evidently. And speaking of it, in 1980, a fantastic example of this was there was the Godzilla Hong Kong Phooey Hour.
Yes. I remember that Godzilla cartoon, yes. And Hong Kong Phooey. How can you not love Hong Kong Phooey?
Love him.
Exactly.
Awesome.
He's the #1 super guy.
But unfortunately, they never met. We didn't get to see Godzilla and Hong Kong Phooey.
What's Hong Kong Phooey going to do? Go up and give him a manicure?
This was kid-friendly Godzilla, right? This was Godzilla that helps people, not Godzilla.
With Godzuki.
Things that
wow.
Recently, but
there's the Phooey.
You are so quick on the draw with Hong Kong Phooey. That was impressive.
I just like that he has all of this right near his desk.
He has 100 different toys right here in case I got it.
Joe, where did you get that? I want that.
This came out maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. From it was some company. They did a few Hanna-Barbera movies about this size.
John's trying to grab it. Watch out.
Just reach right out
the
there.
manicure episode.
Right. Okay, so wait a minute.
To grab it.
What is a helpful Godzilla? Here, kid, let me move this building out of your way.
Well, it was there was a ship full of like scientists or researchers or
Yeah.
something, and they were out in the ocean,
Mhm.
and they had they would encounter problems or whatever, and they had Godzuki with them, Godzilla's nephew, Godzuki, who was like
Yeah.
a little tiny version of Godzilla. He was on the ship with them. And
And
then
didn't they communicate with Godzilla with
yeah,
sonar, didn't they? They used sonar or something?
they could push a button and contact him somehow. And then so Godzilla would, if there was suddenly a giant robot or a giant monster would show up, and then Godzilla would come rising up out of the ocean and take care of it.
Right.
Oh, God, I had blocked out Godzuki. I'd forgotten about Godzuki.
I honestly think most
Never
of these
forget.
cartoons were designed for people to talk about 40 years later at a convention. Because
Clearly,
it's
they
just-
must have been.
Um,
That little boat. And so they would always irritate Godzilla, like the sound, because it would show him sleeping on the bottom of the ocean, just hanging out, doing whatever Godzilla does, and then boo 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 boo. He's like, oh crap.
yeah,
I
I've gotten to that point as an adult that all of the monsters I was told to fear as a child, I'm just like, no, if you would have just left him alone, none of this would have happened. Like,
Right.
seriously, all of this is your fault. You know, like if you hadn't done nuclear experiments, no Godzilla, y'all. So
I like the picture that Kevin put up as just Godzuki's butt.
You're welcome, everybody.
Well,
Good
Michael,
morning.
that doesn't apply to Pacific Rim. No, those critters came here to fuck us up.
That's
Yes,
true. That's
That
true.
is 100% correct.
And at least in the Godzilla remake that they did a few years back, you have that one great line where everybody's like, "Should we drop a bomb on him?" He's like, "No, let them fight. Just get out of their
That's
way.
great.
Let them do what they need to do."
Let them do what they need to do. Exactly. I wish now there'd been a Pacific Rim cartoon with a little tiny Pacific Rim nephew.
No,
a little mini Jaeger. Is that what you?
no,
Yeah, that's
Coming in
that's
2022, Pacific
that is-
Rim and his little friend.
That is exactly what they would have done in 1980 with Pacific Rim. You would have had the adults, but then you would have had a bunch of their kids with their robot stuff.
They would have stolen.
Robot.
They would have stolen the. What were they called? They're not kaiju. The
Jaegers.
They would have. They would have stolen a Jaeger, right? And
when you brought up Godzuki and that idea, I just want to do like the meme with Godzilla and go, nope.
right. Just turn around and go back into the ocean.
Exactly.
But 1980, I mean, you had your standbys like the Super Friends were still on because that ran eternally from 73 to 86.
And I think the Smurfs started that year, didn't they?
Smurfs was the following year.
It was the
Yeah.
following year. Okay.
And
Okay.
the Smurfs were, it's one of those things where I think by like 83, 84, and 85, NBC and the major networks realized that they had way too much competition. Animation on Saturday wasn't as special because you had all the stuff that showed every day in the afternoons.
Mhm.
So they started doing less and less like original programming. And there was a point where it was like an hour and a half of Smurfs, like
Yeah,
through,
I remember that.
in the morning. And I'm like, and I remember I watched the Smurfs because my mom loved the little figurines. And she would actually give us money to buy them at the school store because for some reason the school stores were pushing those like crack. And so I remember watching it, but even as a little kid, like I was the kid that would watch everything, but at the same time, there were certain things where like, I'm watching this and I have no idea why. And the Smurfs really became that. And it really didn't help when they tried to like add kid Smurfs.
Yes.
Well, yeah, they had to, and that's the nature of animation. If a cartoon's going to run that long, they have to switch it up and make it different every year. So we got more and more different iterations. That's why we got Scrappy Doo, because they had to keep changing Scooby.
Yeah, and we will never forget Hanna-Barbera
Living
for Scrappy Doo.
Even though I will give them credit for making Scrappy Doo into a villain in the live action movie. I thought that was pretty cool.
NBC was,
I'm sorry. Like Kevin hated that comment. No.
and NBC Saturday Morning was in rough shape this year in 1980. The Smurfs really saved that network Saturday morning lineup. The Smurfs turned NBC around, and that's when they started getting more and more successful original new Saturday morning stuff through the rest of the 80s. The 1980 lineup is almost all reruns. That weird Flintstones comedy show with Frankenstones and whatnot, that was just about the only original new stuff that was on NBC that year. Other than that, everything else they were showing, those Godzilla cartoons and Hong Kong Phooey and Daffy Duck and Batman and the Super 7 and everything they were showing was reruns.
You know, according to this, it actually started in 81.
Yeah.
The Smurfs, yeah.
Yeah, the Smurfs started in 81.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they had that special and then that ran Primetime, which was
The
basically
Primetime
the creation of Smurfette.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were earlier cartoon versions and things because the Smurfs was a very old property from Europe.
Yes, it was.
already at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, if you ever, I have a friend. I know that shocks everybody, but I have friends that live in the UK that I podcast with, and he was showing covers of like this UK kids magazine from like the late 70s, and the Smurfs were like on the covers because the comics were huge over in Europe.
Yeah,
so
and
that
it started with it was a like a medieval adventure comic strip series with the human characters Johann and Pee-wee, and the Smurfs were supporting characters that were introduced in the Johann and Pee-wee stories and then became hugely popular and took over. And Johann and Pee-wee were eventually added to the American Saturday morning Smurfs cartoons. We got those Johann and Pee-wee characters, but they actually came first.
Well,
yeah.
I kind of wish some stuff that I got exposed to as a kid, never really hit big here in the States. Because I remember Boys Life, published like cartoon strip versions of like the tripods and Tintin. I mean,
Tintin and Asterisk are two properties that everybody, like, if you listen to shows like podcasts like from the UK or Australia, they'll drop those like we drop the Super Friends, because those were just like libraries always had like an Asterisk and a Tintin collection.
Yeah, everybody knows them in other parts of the world.
And we are just like, yeah, that was a Steven Spielberg animated film.
Wasn't that a movie? I don't remember.
Yeah, but the great thing, my first exposure to Tintin was, translations that were published. Boys Life was like the scouting magazine.
Yeah.
Right. And they, I don't remember how long it did, but, when I was a kid, they actually published some decent, comics and fiction in there, as well as, the scouting.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And by the 80s, they would actually collect them into pretty nice, oversized graphic novels that you could rent from your local library. That was how I started into Tintin. Was that was what I would read. I'd go to the library, like, pick a book. I'm like, in Tintin, because there was like 47 of them. So you had a lot of stuff to read.
Some of them are a little politically incorrect now, but
absolutely, yes.
Sharon in the I remember this there's the Smurfs in a UN commercial.
Yes.
And please seek this out. It is horrifying. It's the Smurf village gets carpet bombed.
They're just
a legitimate United Nations commercial.
They're just playing and they're singing la 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 la, and then they start dropping bombs on them, and they start running.
It's just like a Saturday Night Live sketch.
Yeah. Guys, thank you. This is what we're going to keep doing, panels like this throughout forever. I am so happy that we were able to get together and do this morning.
You're going to make me pull that Howard the Duck novelization out again, aren't you?
Yes. 100% yes. There's so much that we have created so much content over the past few days. If you'll allow me to also talk about synergy. But we, guys, thank you again. All the links to all of your guys' things will be in the notes that I'm going to do. And somebody says Alf Tales for a future episode.
Yes.
It was amazing. I mean,
that was actually one of the few properties that, actually expanded and was fairly canonical for the original show, because you got to see Alf prior to Melmac getting, because Melmac blown up, right?
Yeah.
Well, Melmac blew up. So prior to Melmac's destruction.
There was Alf and then Alf Tales. And Alf Tales
yes,
it was amazing when they like adapted, what was it, Cinderella as Elvis, and they had Colonel Tom Parker.
Yes.
My God, I was just howling in that one.
So
Popples.
Popples, yeah.
I just Popples, you cowards. I'm sorry, that just caught me on the comment.
We'll do it. I think that's a good place to end. But yes, Popples. Next time, all Popples for an hour and a half.
Not with me.
I'm down with Popples. I have thoughts. I owned 4 of them.
John will be on a break that night. He will be he's washing his hair that night. Yeah. Guys, thank you again for all the panels you've been on with us this weekend and before that, and panels that I'm going to make you do soon.
Mm-hmm.
But
Hey,
guys,
as long as I've got you and we're on record,
yes,
what's with the roller panel? Is it gonna show? What happened to it?
I am still waiting on verification for where it is and when we can show it. It's out in the ether in amongst the DragonCon overlords, but that was very fun, and we're going to show it sometime. But I will. It met the great lost panel now. But yeah, we're totally gonna. We did another one. We're gonna keep doing those. I don't care. All right, guys. Thank you again. We are gonna be showing some other awesome panels here in a few minutes, and just hang out with us. We'll do cool stuff. Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Joe.
All right.